that sets us up very nicely for the panel discussion. I'd like to ask Giles and Shuji to come and join us as well. As they make their way up here, slightly remiss of me and us, given that we want to be modern and innovative and digitized, we do have our Twitter handle, which we would love you to participate on. It's a very simple one. It's at ARCSA 2020. That's at ARCSA 2020, to a chance to tweet on what you've heard in the course of the conference and add your own thoughts as well. So we're going to move to a bit of a panel session, but this rather fits beautifully with the whole concept of innovation here, because it's an innovative approach to a panel session. You'll see Peter V'landys is not actually here with us, CEO of Racing New South Wales. However, he has answered a series of questions which we would like to put to all the panelists, and we're going to use Peter's answers as the springboard into the panel discussion. I hope that makes sense. Let me just explain what I mean. We'll start with the first question we have. So from your perspective, we asked Peter, what is driving racing as a sport to develop new and innovative race concepts? And he said,
it's the generational change. You know, unfortunately, or fortunately, our generation is completely different to the upcoming generation. And I can see that in my own office, where I have a 28-year-old and I have a 20-year-old, and even that generation are completely different. Their tastes are different, their behaviour is different, they're different types of customers. If we continue to aim for the upper demographic, the older demographic, we will never leave a future for racing. You have to aim for all generations. And our new races aim for the younger generation, and we have developed the race to be their generational race. But the younger generation don't want to do what their parents do. You know, when the parents went on Facebook, they all went on to Snapchat and Instagram, etc. So you've got to do your research and see what their tastes are, what they like. You know, they have a lot less time. They're more technologically advanced. So racing has to keep up with that generational change and that customer change, because you know, for us as administrators, we've got to keep our customer completely satisfied. And different generational customers have different tastes, different expectations. You know, in my generation, we were just as happy to sit on a cement seat and eat hot dogs and pies. Well, that's the new generation prefer to drink Moët Chandon and Veuve Clicquot. They're not looking at hot dogs and pies. So you have to move with that time. And when I was a kid, you'd walk into a supermarket and you'd have wholemeal bread and white bread. Now you've got a whole laneway of breads because people's tastes change. You go into a pub and you'd have new beer and old beer. Now you've got 20, 30 boutique beers because those industries have kept up with the generational change. Racing has a challenge to keep up and keep those generations. And I don't care what anyone says, by keeping traditional races and doing business the way we've been doing, we have been on the decline. And not only in Australia, but everywhere. So when your business is on the decline, you have to look at it and say, I need to get the new customers. And there's not a race course in Australia that was increasing their attendances or, and getting more people interested in racing, because the generations just weren't coming.
Okay, that's a pretty unequivocal message coming from Peter V'landys there. I'm going to put that first to you, Shuji. It's all about the new generation. I mean, would you go along with that?
Yes. Yes. I totally agree with that. And in Japan, in older days, that the people had no option, no many options but go into the race courses. But these days, people have many choices other than horse racing, and we had to be more attractive. And so in order to do that, we had to be more innovative. So, and as I said in my presentation, feeling that I'm part of the race or participation in the race is really important, I think. And as I shown in the video, the people get excited before the race, before the gate opens. That kind of feeling is quite important, I think.
Giles, I mean, it does beg the question what that does for existing fans, for the older generation who are putting a lot of money through the sport as well?
Yeah, you can't isolate the existing fan base. I mean, the real economy of racing at the moment is still that existing fan base. We need to make sure, therefore, that any innovation we are doing has got credibility with that existing base. You certainly don't want to isolate them. And that's why the innovation needs to be taking account of trends that are out there at the moment from the competition, so from other sports or other entertainment, trends around things such as a more bite-sized format, so whether that's video clips or on-demand type activity or T20 cricket, has to take account of engaging the fan in a different way. We have to get them involved in whatever that innovation is. And examples of that, well away from racing, is the whole thing like TikTok and esports, those types of things that we're seeing. How do we get our sport to engage with that younger racing fraternity as well?
Just a quick question there. TikTok, how many out here have enjoyed TikTok? Yeah, not many. Have a look, it's quite fun, actually. Not sure how valuable it is, but it's quite fun. It's called TikTok, have a look. Yeah, and I suppose, Shuji, at the same time, a lot of what you were telling us about up there was about, yes, innovative ways of reaching out to the audience, but you've had a tried and tested innovative race for many decades now. Do you get any great sense within Japan that there's a desire for more radical race concepts?
I don't have the answer for that question at the moment, but our imagination is it's not just a concept, or I mean that the concept of the race is just the important, because apart from that, to have a good race program all through the year, not just the concept race itself is the key to success. I believe that to have a well-planned race programs is more important, not just the concept of the race.
That's good language, actually, to take us straight to the next question raised to Peter. From his perspective, what is driving racing as a sport to develop new and innovative race concepts? Hold on. Try that one more time. Okay, that's not picking up. Never mind. Let's do this one, which is equally pertinent, actually. What has been the impact of competition amongst racing bodies locally, where relevant, regionally and internationally on the development of innovative race concepts?
Look, I think competition breeds excellence. No one should be scared of competition. Competition is your friend. Apathy is failure. If you continue doing the things the same way, time in, time out, you will fail. I think the proof for me is that when New South Wales started increasing its prize money and becoming competitive, the other states followed suit. Victoria, to its credit, increased its prize money, not only for its bread and butter races, but also for its group and listed races. And in more recent times, Queensland is now increasing their prize money. And that's good for the participants because, you know, they've got to earn a living out of racing as well. And the prize money levels, you could not sustain a business for some of these participants. So by increasing prize money in New South Wales, it's had a multiplier effect in Victoria, Queensland, and again, both, I take my hats off to Victoria and Queensland because they're introducing new innovative races. In Victoria, they've got the All-Star Mile, and there's a number of new races up in Queensland, including a 4-year-old, which is, you know, similar to the Golden Eagle.
It sounds a bit like, Giles, Peter saying they did you a favour. They made you up your game, but it was pretty feisty stuff, wasn't it?
It's been an interesting couple of years, though. I think, you know, it's no doubt that we in Victoria, but also I think all the jurisdictions across Australia are a lot sharper in this space than we were a couple of years ago, and we've certainly got more on the front foot and taking on the competition. But I think that we may differ slightly, Peter and I, in what we think the competition is. So I don't think the competition is other racing jurisdictions or race club versus race club. I think the competition is very clearly it's other sports and other entertainment. And that's where the focus has to be on how we compete. I think we're all racing, and it's incumbent upon us as a group to take on that challenge that's coming from the other sport out there, or esports, or other entertainments that are out there. So I think that's where we differ, but we've certainly all become a bit sharper in recent years.
Well, that's a point. And Brian, that is also a very good point, isn't it? Because if you are competing against other sports, you cannot hang around and gently wait for things to improve. So they need a sense of urgency in terms of creating maybe a tradition, but maybe a sense of permanence out of a new initiative, which I get a sense from what you're saying is, not so quickly. It's going to be a fairly slow process. We want to know it's permanent and going to last.
Well, I don't think it's that slow, but I would totally endorse what Giles has said. The competition for racing is not between New South Wales and Victoria, or between New South Wales and every other state in Australia. It's between racing and other sports, or it's between racing and the shopping centre. It's between racing and the fact that kids now don't want to, one of the speakers said earlier, kids don't want to go out to the live event. That's where the competition is. And certainly, you see within the, I think one of the strong appeals of racing is its tradition. And within the pattern and grading system, there is scope to innovate, as we've seen from my presentation. It doesn't take long, and certainly races like the All-Star Mile, if they keep turning up those ratings, that will achieve graded status within 2-3 years, So the reverse has happened as well. As I said, look at the Pegasus Stakes, which has gone in the opposite direction, and there's been other races. But I think the real issue that's driving racing and competition is other sports and other leisure activities, not between. And the Pattern Committee is a great example, believe it or not, within Europe, of cooperation and give and take between all the major countries. The team there has been working together for a long time, and Ireland doesn't see itself in competition with Britain or France, and I don't think they do. Likewise, I don't think they see us in competition.
Giles, do you think you could have gone further, quicker, with more collaboration from other states within Australia than that sort of head-to-head competition that was created?
I think to a degree there's an important part of that, and the pattern is a key part of that. I'm a believer in the pattern, and I think what it does is it helps define how you create a narrative. And if you're not coordinating, then actually you're cutting over each other's narrative. And if we're all after a new audience, the new audience doesn't give a stuff about what we've done in the past. They look at racing as one thing. They don't think of it as jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Increasingly, racing is a global sport, and people look at it as a global sport. And that's the way we've got to present it as well.
Sorry, just one last point. Is there any danger then for you that the new audience, which picks up on All Stars and gets very excited, switches off a bit on the Melbourne Cup, on other great, long-standing, traditional super events?
Yeah, there is a danger of that. And I think one thing that we were very mindful of was that we didn't want to undermine the assets that we already had. The Melbourne Cup is having its 160th running this year. The Cox Plate is having its 100th running this year. These are assets. Lee Grishow there from the Rima Kunen won the Cox Plate last year. These are assets that have been built over generations. And it's not for us to pull them down. It's for us to add to them and to add to the narrative, which is one of the reasons why the All-Star Mile is in the Festival of Racing, because it helped amplify the Festival of Racing. The Festival of Racing is full of also traditional flagship races, but it just needed amplifying, and the All-Star Mile helped do that.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Right, let's get the next question that we put to Peter. What's been the impact of, we've just had that, haven't we? What impact does the level of prize money have in the development of an innovative race concept, and why?
Prize money is important for two reasons. One, you want to attract the best race field to that event. So in order to attract the best horses, the best quality horses, you need to have decent prize money. That's the first thing. With the Everest, we did it that way because it had to be bold and brash, and the marketing campaign was it's the richest race on turf in the world. So that's why prize money is important. But at the same time, you need to have aspirational races for people to invest in the industry. You know, it's like when you buy a lotto ticket, you've got an aspiration to be a millionaire. Well, when you buy a horse, you must have an aspirational race. You know, in my day, it was the Golden Slipper. If you could win the Golden Slipper, that was the aspirational race. You know, and naturally, the Melbourne Cup was the aspirational race for everyone in Australia. If you could win the Melbourne Cup. So you need these races that become aspirational for people to invest in the industry. So prize money is very important. And in addition to that, you need to ensure that your participants continue to be viable, financially viable. And, you know, like it or not, in racing, owners subsidise the industry. You know, if there was no owners, there'd be no industry, because just in New South Wales alone, just to have the horses compete and forget about the capital cost of the horse, it's about $350 million per annum. Yet we pay $250 million in prize money and returns to owners. So they're subsidising the industry by $100 million. So you need to continue to increase prize money to slower the gap between what the owners are subsidising and what they're getting back. And so basically, if you don't do that, racing becomes uneconomical for people to invest in. And people have got X amount of disposable income and they'll spend it on entertainment. So they say to themselves, well, do I own a horse? And, you know, basically I'm just throwing money away. Or do I take my wife to an overseas trip, or do I take her to a restaurant? So we're in competition of that disposable income. And there's a tipping point where the expense overrides how much you get back. And that's been proven in Australia by the fact that our foal rate dropped dramatically because people weren't investing, or owners weren't investing as much, because they weren't getting the sufficient returns. So it's always been part of our strategy to ensure the prize money levels are at a point where the industry is viable.
Shuji, how much do you emphasise prize money for the Arima Kinnin, for example? How much does that play a role in fans and punters' view of what that race is?
Generally speaking, prize money in Japan is satisfactory, but prize money for Arima Kinnin is not very high compared to the prize monies in Dubai or Saudi Cup and Pegasus Cup. But yeah, of course, prize money is very important. But we don't want to be involved in the prize money competition.
No.
Yeah.
Is there a point, though, Giles, where for some races, and I think that's the message coming from Peter with the Everest, the prize money makes the race, and it's as simple as that. And we can talk about the pattern and when you get when your race is recognised within racing.
Yes, of course.
But maybe it doesn't matter. It's just about money. It's a huge price tag. People love that.
Prize money, of course, more broadly is very important for the ecosystem of racing. But if we're talking about innovative races here and the specifics of an innovative race, it sort of depends on what the narrative around that race is. You need enough prize money to generate the narrative. The narrative can be the quality of the field, and so for the All-Star Mile, it's all about a world-class mile race, weight for age mile race, and we needed sufficient money to just go wham on that area. The other thing I talked about earlier was the Jericho Cup. Now, I suspect the Jericho Cup, most of the people at Warrnambool having an extraordinary day in December have got no idea what the prize money is. The punters don't care, the race goers don't care. It's all about celebrating the sort of Australian history and the day itself. All you need to do is get a legitimate field there for the Jericho Cup to run 4,600 metres that can generate the narrative. So it's a bit horses for courses.
And just on the Jericho Cup, where did that idea come from? Was it a sense of, virtue born out of necessity? We need new, innovative ideas for races. Let's have a look at whatever went in the past. Or what pulled that particular race back out of the hat again?
Full credit has to go to a man called Bill Gibbons. He is a retired logistics businessman, and he grew a passion for the history around Anzacs and the Whaler horses and all those types of things. He drove that. The only credit we can take is by embracing that and being sold the dream and then helping him develop that, which is sort of how innovation works. Someone has a great idea and you grab it and you run with it. And that's what happened with the Jericho Cup. The idea came first, and then we worked out how to implement it.
Okay, thank you. Right, next question for Peter. What are the key measures of success in terms of developing innovative race concepts, and why?
Look, for me, there's naturally, wagering turnover is our lifeblood. So a KPI for us is how much wagering do we get. TV ratings are very important. Attendance at the racecourse is exceptionally important. But the one for me isn't any of those three. For me, it's conversion. It's converting those people that come to those big events to become regular customers. That's the challenge we have as racing administrators, is how do we convert these people that maybe once in a year punters to being regular customers. And I have seen that with the younger generation, where they may come to the Everest, but now they're coming at other race meetings throughout the year because they've had such an enjoyable day at that big event. And in particular, the week before the Everest, which is where we promote the Champagne sponsor, gets a lot of young people, you know. So to me, it's more than just, you know, revenue generating and getting attendances. You know, you can get 100,000 people there. The challenge is how many of that 100,000 can you convert to regular customers, to people that have a small bet on the TAB, to people that understand the sport, to people that may become future owners of horses. That's the challenge. That's the KPIs. It's not just the normal ones that we always look at.
And I suppose, Brian, it's the talkability, which was a word I think Giles used earlier, getting that interest level up, but also, although Peter didn't mention it there, the sustainability of what that new concept looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Peter's saying there. I think the good horses will bring some talkability with it as well. I think when you talk about innovation, I thought the idea earlier in the All-Star Mile that the owner could win a life-changing amount of money, and you see it happening in front of your eyes there, was fantastic. And that surely, people are interested in those sort of human stories, and that will lead them to explore racing more. So, I think he's right what he says about the stickability of people who first became interested because there's a big event on in Randwick. But it's definitely how you can keep them and how you can convert them to regular racecourses. Sometimes what puts people off at first in terms of a barrier to understanding or feeling comfortable racing is actually what you really enjoy about it when you learn it. And perhaps we need to do a better job explaining, the intricacies of racing and the beauties of the handicapping system or whatever. It's that cerebral element to it which people are looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, because it can be a very complicating and confusing story.
And that can block you at first. And then when you get past that block, it can be what keeps you hooked and very interested. And there's a job for all of us to do in explaining that better.
Okay, thank you. Right, we had a last question for Peter. What role does the pattern play in the development of new major races? You listening, Brian?
For me, I'm probably a little different to most in the racing industry. I think a pattern really breeds apathy, because you're doing things the same way, you're doing it all. And it's like a tariff, basically. And I think that you should have free trade. You should aspire where basically the way the pattern is, it's like a restraint of trade, because you're just no one can come and compete and take over the pattern or be part of the pattern. And, as I said, competition is your friend. So we should all attain to be part of the pattern rather than having it set in stone and not having any incentive for anyone to start new races. So, look, the pattern's certainly has got its place, but I think it needs to be brought into 2020 and not 1960, and that's the difference. And as I said, the world has moved forward. Where there used to be tariffs between trading partners, now it's free trade, and the economic benefits of, substantial. Well, why are we putting it's like a tariff with a pattern, because you're blocking someone else competing because of the way it's been done in the past. So I think there's we can work with a pattern, but I think the pattern's got to be a lot more flexible and a lot better for people to be innovative.
So you're blocking free trade.
I take it we can take the grading Group 1 status off all the races in New South Wales now. If the pattern is a block, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, I obviously don't agree with that. That's a very simplistic attitude to it. And on the one hand, Peter runs racing with a lot of group and graded races, and has no problem, supporting the pattern in that instance. So You know, as I said in my presentation, it's linked into the breeding industry. It proves its worth over time. It's tried and tested. It doesn't block innovation. I mean, as I said, if his race is of the quality that it looks like it is, that will be a pattern race, you know, within a necessary time frame. So I mean, many people have said this before. They've queried the pattern, but no one has come up with an alternative. The alternative is a free-for-all, and that's chaos. You know, down through the years, you know, the Derby winners, the Guineas winners, the Classic winners, you know what categories they race in. You're able to compare horses of different generations. Breeders know the quality of the black type in their sales catalogues from the quality of the horses that are winning those races. It's a foundation stone. As I said, Peter's obviously shaking up racing, not just in New South Wales, but throughout the rest of Australia. But I think throwing out the pattern is not the solution to it.
I do get a sense though, Giles, I mean, he's poking the bear there. He's he's being big and brash. He's saying you've got to get on, you've got to tread on toes. And that does apply to a certain extent within any business environment, doesn't it? And especially as you have all addressed, it's other sports as well. It's not just about racing. You're dealing with every entertainment, esports, e-gaming, all these other, soccer takes over everything. You've got to get a bit nasty.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think one thing, though, and I'm a believer in the pattern, and I think for me, the core of it, and I'm no pattern aficionado, couldn't argue the pattern with those who know for 5 minutes, but for me, in racing, it is absolutely vital that we show our best foot as we try and compete. That means that the best have to race against the best, and the pattern helps deliver that. And it helps jurisdictions work together to deliver the best against the best. And if we aren't putting the best against the best, we've got no chance of competing against people like soccer or esports or anything like that.
Okay, I think that's a very good note on which to close the panel session. Ladies and gentlemen, just first of all, for our 3 particular panelists, hope you'll put your hands together and express your appreciation. And of course, for Peter V'landys' comments as well. Above all, Dr. Inouye, thank you very much indeed for chairing this session.